is this also something that has been very sort of an obsession for you to really define your own style of graffiti?
In the beginning, when I used to look at graffiti, there wasn't really too much technical styles going on. What I focus on is having your name in more places, on more subway trains, and that's what got me into the graffiti. It wasn't the style or how that it was art, that it was an art form. No, I didn't see it in that way. I saw it in the sense that someone was in a big race, and
Mhm.
they were racing to put their names on as many trains and as many places as they can. And that was my inspiration in that direction. But and then as graffiti, the evolution of graffiti, the lettering, like writers were writing so much that they some writers couldn't compete in that sense. They couldn't write as much as these other writers would do. So their letters started becoming more colorful, more bigger, more style, and that's what kept them in the same level as a guy that was having his name all over the place. So sometimes you can't win the race of putting up your name the most, but you can compete with the style now, which that became a big part of subway graffiti, which was how can you put this technical design on a subway train in a matter of a few hours, because you only have so much time.
Right. So you could almost create the Sonic Bad graffiti alphabet, right?
Oh yes, yes. I can make my letters in the sense that it'll be endless. It is like how can you say? It's like infinity. I have so much imagination to put on a platform that I can only put so much because I just don't have no time to do it in a sense.
Yeah. This is very interesting what you said about first being visible. In a way, I'm just making a parallel with the word of luxury fashion, where basically, a young designer, the first thing that he would do or she would do is to try to get models on the runaway with the clothes. Okay. So
Exactly.
your clothes were basically the graffiti on the train, right?
Yes, yes.
And then you ask yourself as a brand, how do my brand become recognizable? How do I recognize Chanel? How do I recognize Vuitton? How do I recognize Dior? Were you a little bit looking at this other universe in fashion and somewhat being influenced
Well,
by this
in
word?
fashion, there was a graffiti fashion, which I could show you right here.
Because you did some work on that.
Where is it? We would put, we would dress a certain way, and it was like you get yourself a pair of lead jeans that were basically bell bottom because it was the 70s, and
Yeah.
you would put your design on the pants, and then you would have a leather jacket that fit you snug, and you would wear a hat, and then you would have the glasses that were a little bit kind of bigger than your face. So you create your own fashion, and coming from Rockaway, people used to see me and said, "Yo, man, what are you? Why you dressed like that?" I said, "Because I'm Sonic. I'm different. I'm I'm uh I'm about creating style, and it could be the style of fashion or the style of graffiti. It's a certain look. So, but graffiti had a lot to do with fashion as well. But when you're writing like graffiti, I consider graffiti like music. It's like somebody comes out with a song, and the other artist, the other singer comes out and says, "How can I make a song better than that song? How can I get more listeners and more buyers to buy my music?" Yeah, so you have to think in a creative way that you can use a little bit of what that person had and just twist it a little bit around and see where it goes, as experimenting with the beats and the lyrics. And you can actually get their followers in the sense that they like this kind of music. Then if they like that kind of music and that person is number one, and if you do something similar to that, they're gonna follow you and they're gonna like your work. So you're down here, and then once you create something similar to them, and maybe a little bit more technical, a little bit more lyrics, a couple more beats in it, then you become like this, and that person stays down there. And that's the same way graffiti was. Graffiti was in the sense that this guy had this style, these colors, and he rode on that train and he made it so big. Now the next graffiti writer wants to make a more technical style, more colorful, more bigger, and then that graffiti writer goes like this, and then the race begins, and then the competition created an explosion where all these writers wanted to be better than the next writer, but at the same time pretty much copying what they were doing, but improving it and better and better. You know, because some people look at graffiti from the beginning as being just a signature, and people said that's nothing. But if it wasn't for that person, they wouldn't be a person like me, because of the race and the competition and the explosion of the whole, what they call fresh, something new, something that was incredible to a young person to see at the time.
So, which is cool because you are talking about competition, but also competition that are friends of you. So, if you think of a few, graffiti artists with which, like the Messi, the Ronaldo, the Mbappe of graffiti that were in your, like, your universe, who would you think of in particular?
Well, there were many graffiti writers out there, but like I said before, I was from Brooklyn, which they had more graffiti writers in Brooklyn than in Rockaway, Queens. Rockaway, Queens, there really weren't no graffiti artists at the time there. We had Is the Wiz, which he lived in Queens, and Is the Wiz pretty much moved around. He lived in Manhattan, he lived in Rockaway, Queens. I think he lived in other parts of Queens. But I never knew where he was basically from, because what you would see, it was on a subway train. So you never really knew where the person was from, because the train will run from pretty much all the boroughs. It'll go from Queens to Brooklyn to Manhattan to the Bronx. So a lot of this graffiti was moving around, and I didn't know anybody at the time. And you don't know where they're from, but you always start to recognize the different styles at the time, because coming from Brooklyn, a graffiti artist from Brooklyn had a different style from a graffiti writer in Queens, and then they had a different style from the Bronx and a different style from Manhattan. So in the 70s, graffiti was like the way it is now, but around the world. So you could tell this graffiti writer have this style from France. You could tell this guy has this graffiti style from Asia. You could tell this guy has graffiti style from, let's say, Germany and Spain. Everybody has their own certain different style. That's the way it was in New York City until the internet came out. Basically, before that, it was when Henry Chalfant came out with a book called Subway Art. Henry Chalfant and Martha Cooper, they came out with a book called Subway Art, which now every kid from every borough and across the world got this book and opened it up, and they started copying what they saw in these books. So then it became kind of difficult to find out where the writers were from, because everybody basically had the same style.
Yeah.
The New York City style at that time, which was the early to mid 80s.
Cool. Couple of names that resonate in your universe to you?
Well, I painted. Well, is the Wiz was one guy that he was very important in inspiring me as a graffiti bomber. A graffiti bomber is a guy that gets his name up as much as he can. And to me, is the Wiz was the king of putting his name up the most. And he didn't only put his name up the most, he went with the evolution of coming from first he started writing Mike, which that's like a common graffiti name at the time. So he changed his name to Ike. He took away the M and made it Ike. And then he created his name Is, which was a two-letter name. When he came out with Is, it was more easier to put two letters on a subway train than it was to put up four letters. So it was a lot quicker, and you could put up his name more. And the more you put up your name, the more you're going to be on the higher level in the graffiti world. So Is the Wiz was one of the main guys when it comes down to bombing. There was also a guy named Jester, DY 167 TC crew. He was an incredible bomber as well. I think he was king before Is. I think he was king before Is the Wiz. And then eventually he slowed down, and then Is the Wiz kept moving, and he just kept moving on. DY 167, which his name was Jester as well, he had this unique tag style that were inside the interior of the subway trains, which when you're sitting inside the train, you see the graffiti inside the train, which was pretty much signatures. But when you step outside the train, you would see the murals on the outside, which was the lettering and the colors, and basically done with spray paint on the outsides. The inside of the trains were done with basically felt tip markers at the time. Yeah. So that was Jester. He was a master tagger. He was incredible. And then later on, other writers came out, but also there was this other graffiti writer that was probably before Jester, was another writer named Vinny, which he was a guy that he had his name on the IND line, which is the IND line is a line that runs from Queens, from the beginning of the subway system all the way to the end. It was called the independent subway line, the INDs, which he had king that line, and he had his name like on every train. And those three names were my big inspiration when it comes down to as a graffiti writer. Now, becoming a graffiti artist, then you had the Fabulous Five, of course, which was Lee, Doc, Mono. You had Dell. You had Moose, and these guys started creating the whole, painting the whole train top to bottom, end to end, putting characters. And then also you had, and then during a little bit after that time, you had the CIA crew, which was Dondi CIA, and the list keeps going on and on.